right, and welcome back to the Prometheus Afterthoughts podcast, the podcast where we talk to the most recent boot of Prometheus, and that is Jocelyn. Jocelyn, how are you today?
Hey, Casey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well myself. So it was very unfortunate to see after all that time of you being this season's true underdog going out that way. So how are you feeling? This is your time to talk about anything you want. So let's hear it.
I'm doing okay now. It was rough to watch it at first. I was sad when it happened. I think I was we have all talked about that being a fever dream of a weekend. And getting voted out was no different, where like I processed it in the moment, but watching it was so different with like space and time in between. Time just flew by while we were playing. So it was interesting to watch it, knowing what was going to happen, see the challenge happen, watch my face, realize what I did, watch the confessional after. Still mad at myself, still not a question I should have gotten wrong. Just a dumb wrote something fast and then that was it. And that's not the easiest way to go out for sure. Who knows what would have happened on a tiebreaker question? You know, there's no guarantee. It's not like I was one away from winning. So there's no guarantees, but it was sad. It was rough. Yeah, it was quite a stretch. It's really interesting now with hindsight, because coming into the game as a new player and as someone new to orgs and even new to the Survivor-esque version of a reality game, I came in with such little strategy. And I don't know that I'd go in with a ton more now. I don't think that would ever be my angle to be super strategic about stuff, but being put in that elder position was really, really strange because I didn't have a ton of experience. I didn't have a ton of strategy. And then I was in this position where my best move was to not, from my point of view, be in a ton of strategy. I felt like the way that things were going for my team, there wasn't a lot of benefit to throwing names out and kind of painting a target with me, because if I throw someone's name out, they don't go home and then they're part of the strong majority and I get cooed. It doesn't do anything to put a name out in my position. So I tried to just sit back and get the lay of how the team was going so that when I was in a position to vote or make decisions or throw names out, I had as much info as I could on the team. But it was really it was a good twist, because it was a really tough way to start the game as someone new. And the fact that it wound up, I mean, you knew it was going to be Tracy going in, but Tracy and Bloody and Louise and go.
Well, actually, I was actually just thinking about this earlier today. 2 seasons in a row now, we were actually going to potentially get someone who was 80 years old playing this game.
Oh my God, that would be so fun.
Yeah. Hopefully in the future he will join us. But at the time he was literally like a week away from retirement. So he just wanted to get through the rest. The funny thing is he ended up going back to work. I guess retirement did not suit him, but he's a huge Survivor fan. And so like the twist by no means was designed with him in mind, but it would have potentially really helped someone who was 80 years old playing with players who averaged around 30 years old. So Tracy would not have actually been the initial elder had this man played.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've played one org since this, and that age factor definitely factors in differently in most other games compared to this one, especially. But wow, that would be so interesting. I hope he winds up playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, once we got into final casting and the game actually starting, Tracy, Louise, Bloody, and I were in a room at the very, very beginning, and that if I had been able to pick, like we had a really good conversation going, I think we might have wound up on the same team. So I wouldn't have had that protection then, which would have changed things significantly then, I think. But yeah, it's all just kind of the luck of it or the unluck of it. But yeah, and then once we got through the merge, I kind of had no choice but to win. it wasn't my plan to come in and be super competitive, although I know that I don't like losing at stuff. So if it had gone differently, I don't know how much I could have turned it off, but I didn't have to. I couldn't at that point. I kind of had to control my own game as much as I could. So having it be that close when I lost safety on something that I felt like I could have won when I was doing a pretty good job of winning when I needed to was disappointing, but I'm really proud of where I wound up getting this far in the game. I know we don't do DVD covers, but technically I'm on the DVD cover, which is gigantic for never having played. And at that point, having watched I think 2 seasons of Survivor, one and a half at that point.
I mean,
Now 41 later.
which is wild, which is absolutely wild. But no, I mean, that's the thing. I do think you played a good game. And, Ben says it during one of the stick segments where he's like, you have Jocelyn on the other hand, I really respect that. Like, she was there and she took in all of this, all of this information that was coming your way. But the thing is that like, you won every challenge you needed to win to keep you in the game that much longer. And sometimes winning challenges except for except one
really important one.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think in your case, like you were definitely in that position where you were playing a good game, but you definitely needed to win challenges to make it a little bit further. And yeah, had you had made it into the final 4, I have no doubt in my mind you would have been in the top 3 and you would have done really well overall. But I know you probably don't want to, hark on that too much. It just reminds me so much of season 1, pretty much what happened with Andrew. It's like, the one thing he needed to win to make it to the end, he just couldn't even finish, But yeah, I still have those tiebreaker questions too. So maybe at the reunion, we throw you, Aaron, and Tracy all against each other to see who get the tiebreaker questions, because we had 2 planned just in case.
I'll have to see if I still have my notes. I'm sure I do somewhere.
Yeah, your notebook, I don't think it ever made the episodes, but I know your notebook literally had tabs to it. I don't remember what the tabs were. One might have been mythology. Maybe one was the game itself. I'm not really sure. But I remember it did have tabs.
Yeah, I think I had one for teams. So that was like player information. I had one for challenges. I had one for kind of like general timeline. The mythology, I was just kind of keeping track with each challenge so that if a question related to the challenge, I knew when it came in. But
yeah, which is like absolutely amazing. I love that you did that. I love that like you also alongside, Bloody you're like kind of like our original fans. And so you knew to take those notes because that's really important. But yeah, I just really look at your game and I think it's like so funny, especially, and I can't help but compare it to Tracy because you both were elders. You did both have drastically different styles of, gameplay. And I do believe, if you had a little bit more knowledge under your belt, you would play a better game, but also like playing the game you did play was fantastic. So like you couldn't have asked for too much more. So maybe in the future, despite potentially a negative experience for your second game, you hopefully play another org in the future. Cause I think you have the capability to win. I really do.
I didn't do terribly, but I did not do this well. That's for certain.
Well, if you don't mind,
12th out of 18. I think.
That's not horrible. It sounds like it's
it was
right
middle.
before
It was
merge,
fine.
right?
Right after. I'm gonna get yelled at for not remembering this.
Right at, because I know a lot of people.
It was a weird season where we like merged on It was like, yeah, they play around with some early groupings and ungroupings and stuff. So.
Gotcha. And I'm sure that was a full game too, if I remember correctly, because I know you told me about it once before. So yeah, I mean, definitely completely different, especially when you have a life and I know you have kids and, whatnot. So it's a lot harder to manage a full game versus, playing 2 days.
Yeah. Trying to keep up with the private messaging of 18 to 22-year-olds when I have 2 grandkids running around the house and a full-time job. And yeah, I think minis might be more my style.
Yeah, fair enough. And I also just want to comment too, I should have noticed it immediately, but you have a different tapestry this time.
I do, and it's foolproof. It could go either way, and it's fine.
It's really funny. I've had a couple people message me that said they lost it during that confessional. I didn't even notice during the initial round of reviewing footage. And when I was also editing, I completely forgot about that. And
Yeah.
I lost it. I thought that was fucking hysterical. So it's kind of like this nice little, like, more humorous moment before, you get out. So it's nice that we have that too.
In my
Yeah.
lowest moment, it was like, wait a minute.
Was that just to like give some sort of like color to the background or?
Yeah, I had pride flags up at one point for a company event that we did during Pride. So I had a bunch of little like magnet thumbtacks up there, and I was like, well, it's just a giant white closet wall, so I'll throw something up there.
So that's kind of
And
cool
I
that
did
you
it
had that.
quickly and obviously.
So with your game, do you have any more you want to say? Any final thoughts? Anything we talked about in the podcast or otherwise?
It was really interesting to see the Antonio CJ Bloody Tracy thing and know for sure what had happened, because most of the information had come as I came into the sticks from Antonio. And I love Antonio to death, but I'm not going to take anything that he told us before the game was done at face value. So it was fun to see it. Fun might not be the total right word, because seeing CJ melt down a little bit when he realized what he did, and knowing that up until Antonio had reached out, CJ had been the only person from the other team who had tried at all to work with any of us in any significant way. And I had a lot of trust in CJ, and it was really interesting to see that he, I don't know, we'll wait and see what he has to say, intentionally, accidentally, I'm not sure, blew up Jenny's game. And now watching all of it with the context of knowing that they knew each other, it was just, that was, I think, one of the most interesting parts to me in watching it, was seeing all of that unfold now with a little more knowledge. So
Yeah. And I mean, he was, most of his confessionals are on the shorter side, but like you can
mhm.
still see in his one confessional after Jenny was sent packing that he was upset. Like he
Yeah.
could not believe what he had done, which it's like, it's so crazy because had Ben not flipped the first time, the whole trajectory of day two could have been switched. And had CJ just voted the way you had said, the whole trajectory of the second half of day two would have changed, which
Yeah.
is so crazy, which that's also another segment I love, is like seeing your pure excitement as like that plan is coming together, and then Antonio coming in the room and you're like, want to take a shot, and he's like at a player or have a shot of like I just love that whole segment. But I love your enthusiasm, because I think that was like the first time we really had seen you like take charge in the game. And really, these games are about timing, and that was the time.
It
But
was the only time I had like, there was no benefit to, if I had jumped earlier, I would have been jumping to the bottom. Um, and I wouldn't have been opposed to it if someone approached me. But until it was obviously done for the connections that I had, it didn't make sense to make a giant move on my part. And then I was I was in a position where it was the only thing I could do, but there actually was a door open at the time that I needed it. So why not try for it? What was the worst case? If they weren't going to try to vote her out, then I was on the chopping block at some point anyway. Like it, the way it all played, I either had to win or try. And for a little bit, I did both, but it didn't work out.
yeah. So actually two other small things really quick I just thought of. So one, I'm actually curious, what was your, if you can remember, what was your actual thoughts when your team finally cooed you? Like, did that scare
I
you or?
It did, because we had been talking fairly openly about stuff. So when I didn't know that if they had brought up like, this isn't working, let's try something new, it would have been, I wouldn't have loved it, but it wouldn't have been a surprising conversation. The fact that it was completely secret and then moved so seamlessly into voting Ben made it very clear how many conversations I hadn't been a part of. So that made me a little nervous, but I was also excited to get to actually play the game. As naive as that sounds, at sitting safe is nice because you're not going to get voted out, but also I signed up to play a game. So it was kind of nice to be in a seat where I was forced to play a little bit more, or where other people were in a position to play with me too, where it didn't need to be so out of the blue, me just listing a name. I felt for so much of the beginning half of the game, like I almost didn't even have any right to say a name too, because like I wasn't voting. I could say the name all I wanted. Other people had to put themselves and their games on the line to decide how they were going to vote. It impacted everyone except me way more than it impacted me. At the end of the day, we lost a challenge. Someone was going home. My team was going to have one less person. And none of them were really a bigger or smaller threat to me that I had clocked at that point, because anytime I was in a room, they needed to get into the other room to figure out what the majority vote was going to be. So, yeah.
Which that even further goes to what I was saying earlier. It's just so it's like two, and both are completely valid because, you know, in these games, you have to adapt to the people that are around you. So there's never one set strategy. So it's very interesting to see that you had taken that approach. And then we have Tracy who took the other approach, which ultimately in a lot of ways, it worked out for the both of you because the both of you had made the final five. Like that is the end of the freaking game. So it's very interesting in that regard, which also, speaking of Tracy, you know, it's like you two were kind of like enemies in the game, but there was never any sort of, at least to my knowledge, there was never any sort of like hard feelings about it. Like there was a couple of points at which I thought were really funny. You guys just very openly were like, well, I know Tracy's voting for me. And she's like, yep.
Yeah.
But she's loyal, which is just really funny too. But
that's what it was. It didn't feel personal. It felt like I wasn't on her team and she was going to stay team strong until there were none of us left. So it was pretty clear. And anytime we were in a room together, she was very tight-lipped, and she's not a tight-lipped person. And it just was very clear that there was no room. There was no little crack in the door to try and start a conversation there. That's actually why between Tracy and Bloody, when everyone was kind of clocking them as a pair, that's why I actually started targeting Tracy, was that Bloody's actually someone I really wanted to work with from the beginning of the game. And with Antonio and Aaron, that whole thing was really interesting because when they reached out, I didn't even know. It seemed like it might not have been real. And then it's such a short period of time. It was a matter of 2 hours that we were kind of an alliance. And there's so much going on that it was fun to see in hindsight and watching that it was a real thing to them, and that Aaron actually like struggled with a decision kind of in the end of which side to go with. But I didn't feel 100% sure in that at all. I definitely still felt, until I was out, I felt like I was mostly on my own with a little bit of help from some people. I felt like Antonio, like we got along really well. I didn't know how sincere the working together was on his part. So it was nice to see that. But because of that, I would have been really open to working with Bloody. The only way that I felt like that was going to happen is if Tracy was out. So that was for me. It was Tracy was someone who clearly wasn't going to work with me and was a potential barrier for other people that it would have been helpful to work with. So,
yeah. And, you know, I feel like I hate when people ask these sort of questions way long after the game has ended, but like had there had been a tie in this final 6 scenario, would you have kept Antonio to stay in?
Probably then, yes.
Okay. Because I do think...
Now, no. Then, yes.
Which is totally fair. I do think, though, and I think I said it in the podcast, too, I do think that if Antonio had made it to the final 3, I think the only person who could have been able to take him on would have been you.
Thanks, Casey.
I wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah, I think at the time, I very much felt like the personal, like, we were not stranded for 40 days on an island. I was not lonely. Like, okay, I just watched Island of the Idols, so like Karishma felt lonely. Like, it was not anything like that. We were constantly talking to people for a couple days. Um, but the way that everything happened with losing, and our first day just being saying goodbye to people, and then everybody in a row that I had any kind of personal connection with, just getting along with Antonio that well was huge.
Yeah.
Feeling like I was having conversations with someone was huge. And without knowing as much strategy wise, I think in the moment I very, very much would have been swept up by that like emotion of it, and not thought about the actual ramifications. I don't think I would have been able to be cutthroat then.
Then that's the key. So for a future, we'll just leave that there. So I guess two other things. I know I keep saying other things. So I guess one, we can, at a later point, the reunion possibly talk about maybe a potential other nemesis or villain, your enemy. So we'll just leave that tidbit out there. So watch the reunion, everyone.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, and this is potentially semi-serious. I'm not one to potentially hide things. So there is footage that did not make this episode and won't be in the finale either. And it was actually about my questioning. It was in regards to something you had said and a couple of the members of the Sticks. It was in regards to my questioning that you initially had felt as if I tanked your game. Because of my line of questioning, which everyone in the game at that point knew about the challenge. But I just want to apologize, for making you feel that way. But also, I do want to know, like, and if you do, it's perfectly fine. Because, like I said, I don't want to censor anyone. I don't want to hide any information. But like, if you actually feel that I tanked your game, like I said, I really do apologize. But like I said, everyone did know about it, and it's not going to make the episode because there's no real relevance to it in the in the story of it all.
Yeah, no, you have nothing to apologize for. It was mostly deflecting with humor. Also, I'm sure a little bit of embarrassment that I didn't remember what was happening and deflecting that way. I'm sure that, I'm trying to remember back because that's a hard one because that's like the emotion of the moment, which is harder to remember and in favor of logic. But I think there definitely was a little piece of like, I should have known that. Like, I should have remembered that. And if I didn't, maybe other people didn't too. But it wasn't like I wasn't legitimately like mad at you or upset. Because I think I had like jokingly poked at you in previous tribals also about lines of questioning. So,
well, yeah. So I actually thought you were just dodging the question. I didn't legitimately know that you didn't know or remembered.
Oh,
about
no,
the
I did
challenge.
not remember.
Oh, I thought you were dodging because you also have that like smile. And I was like, she's trying to dodge it, which is then why I went to Tracy. But yeah, you say you actually start off your exit interview that way. You were like, I think Casey just inadvertently sunk my game. And I remember watching that footage and being like, oh my God, like I feel so bad.
It wasn't like you intentionally did it. That was not in any way how I felt or what I was thinking. It was more like, did this moment but it wasn't even tanked at that point. It was, I think everyone except me, and maybe not everyone, but I think it's fairly clear, especially now 40 seasons of viewing later. That's another big part of it, that I had only seen very early Survivor seasons at that point. So part of not remembering was also I didn't have the greater Survivor context of that's just how it is at the end now. To remember when I watched the first season of Prometheus, that was following kind of the same track. So there's lots of layers to not remembering it, but it was just me not remembering it and then being like, come on, man. You told everybody that it wasn't real. You're fine. I apologize for making you feel for a year like you have something to apologize for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's in the past, but yeah. But anyway, I feel like there was one other thing I was going to say, but I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, I felt really bad, like I said, because I just remember seeing that, and I remember hearing some of the people on the sticks say that. But ultimately, you were probably the most threatening person in the game. No, 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 not probably. You were the most threatening. So I guess take it as a massive compliment, you know. But yeah. On that note, do we have any final thoughts?
Nothing I need to clarify or anything. Just thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for making a really great game. It's you guys run it really well, but also just all of the work that goes into how it's all built and the mythology aspect of it. It's just a really cool experience, and I feel really lucky to have been able to be part of it. So thank you. Thank you to everybody on production. A lot of behind the scenes work too, but thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone who has come on, Jocelyn, especially right now, and to everyone that's been watching. So I guess on that note, we're going to end the podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.